The Centers for Spiritual Living Diversity Inclusion Commission welcomes you to Being an Effective Change Agent, Part 1, with our presenter, Reverend Michelle Senegal.
Participate, real time, real space, and so they're asking for us to send them the recordings. And so do know that you are being recorded, and for whatever reason, if you feel as though you want to opt out, then by all means do that. We're not going to do a breakout activity tonight, but normally when we do, I just want you to know that Zoom does not record breakout rooms. So you could, be as candid and as you want to be, because that is never recorded. It's just the main room activity. So for quality of sound, if you could remain muted unless you are opening your mic to ask a question or make a comment. If you have other devices in your space, you may want to put those on Do Not Disturb, again, so that we are not interrupted. We want to create a quality experience for everyone, and I just had to put mine on Do Not Disturb. We do have raised hand feature, and so in order to access this, all you have to do is click on the participant icon where you see two people, then the list will drop down, and then next, just move the cursor to your name, and then you have the raise hand capability, and so that way we can also acknowledge you. Charlie will be watching for raised hands, as will I. Of course, you can communicate via the chat. What you want to do is make sure that you go to More on your control panel. The very first item when you do the drop-down menu is chat. You click on that, and you can communicate with everyone, or you can communicate with individuals privately. And you have the option of turning your video off or leaving your video on. I suggest if you want to floss your teeth that you turn your video off. We've seen all kinds of things, so I say that jokingly, but I mean, it really has happened. People aren't conscious of the fact that their camera is on and we can see everything. So if you're going to attend to your personal hygiene, you may not want the world to see. So tonight, what we're going to focus on is being an effective change agent. And no, I'm not Reverend Ray Fellis. I am pinch hitting for him. Unfortunately, he lives in an area where there are fires and winds, and he had to evacuate. So I'm stepping in. And we're going to get grounded and centered with an opening prayer, and one of our new commissioners, Victoria Bombery, will lead us in prayer. So I'm going to mute while you do that, and I request that everyone else do the same.
Let's turn within and recognizing God is all in all. God is that goodness that is overflowing, is ever giving. And I am so grateful for this. I'm grateful for the knowledge of this and the deep knowing of it and the embodiment of it. And I am knowing that today, as we enter into this webinar, that we are each and every one open and receptive to all the material that is being presented. That becoming a change agent is just a shift from that requires both internal and external work. They work hand in hand, developing oneself internally, that God space naturally moves into affecting change in the world. The more peace we have, the more peace that is outpictured in the world. The more ethos we have in change, personal change, the more of that ethos is communicated to the outer world. And I am so grateful for Reverend Michelle for stepping in and pitch hitting for Reverend Rafe. And I'm speaking my word for Reverend Rafe, knowing that he is safe, that his community is safe, that all of the mechanisms that are in place to ameliorate fire, they are all working together to keep everyone safe. And I know that this is a part of life. All of this is a part of life. And we move through it with ease and grace. And I allow all this good to just wash over me and wash over every person in this webinar. And I call it good and very good. And so it is.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Appreciate you for doing that. So I want to just frame our time together by taking a look at a couple of quotes by our beloved Ernest Holmes. Because everything changes rapidly around us, it is difficult to vision a changeless reality. And then another one, change is the law of human experience, for only God is permanent. And in the words of Amy Tan, the only cosmological constant is change. So we're going to talk about change very broadly, and then we're going to talk about change with regard to affecting change within our organizational structure. And I've got two guests who are going to help us with that tonight. I'll introduce them in just a moment. And then I'm going to share with you all some information about becoming a change agent as regards inclusion. So what I'm going to do, you all, right now is engage you by, oh, it won't let me do it right now. I'll try and do it later. Oh, you are on another device. Things are acting wacky tonight. So later on, I will, if I can't do it tonight, then we'll do it on Thursday night. I created a poll for you all to assess where you are with regard to change agency and how many of the characteristics you possess. So that looks like we'll have to come at another time. So I'm not going to debrief it because we haven't taken it. So what I want to share with you now is just a very typical change management process model. First of all, request for a change. And that typically follows the identification of a need for a change. And so needs are identified in myriad ways. Oftentimes it's through surveys or focus groups or studies or gap analysis between where an organization is and where it wants to be. In order to get to where it wants to be, oftentimes change is required. So you always have to start there. And then you want to, before you decide that you in fact are going to implement change, you want to discern the impact that that change is going to have on the entire system. And in our case, we're talking about the organization, the various parts of the organization, various functional areas, because everything is interrelated and interconnected. If a change happens in one part of the system, it's going to have a rippling effect throughout the organization. Then, of course, in our organization, you just don't make changes. Things have to be approved by the governing bodies. And so either the change is approved or it's denied. If it is approved, then you go to the next step. You have the go ahead, you implement the change. And after the change is implemented, you always want to monitor your change or have some reporting on it to determine if the change is, of course, attaining or achieving the desired result from the onset. If not, then you have to go back and make some adjustments. So although this is presented in a very logical and sequential way, sometimes you have to back up, right? It's not always the smooth, things don't always unfold exactly the way this model presents. So what we have planned for you tonight is to engage you in conversation and in learning more about CSL, how it's structured, and what the current procedures are for affecting change within the organization. So we have two very qualified guests to do that. We have our chair of the Leadership Council, Kurt Conde. Yay, so let's welcome Kurt. And then we have Reverend Sonia Byrne, our Executive Director for Centers for Spiritual Living. So let's say yay and welcome Sonia as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Kurt and Sonia, you all now have the mic. And if you need to share any slides or anything like that, you should have the capability to do that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I did not know I had such a big platform. I would have come with slides and something. But I love the change management model. And that's exactly how things happen. And we realize, especially now in our organization, that we are in change and the opportunities of that change. In order to get into that process and that model, you want your voice to be heard, and we want voices. We want to hear from people and their experiences and everybody's eyes. You know, we don't see everything, and we want to see what everybody else sees and see how it fits into the whole. And when we hear a certain amount of people saying one thing, that becomes one voice. Oftentimes I'll come with my experience, and it's evident soon that I'm the only one having that experience, and that's a lesson and an experience for me. But that as we communicate together always, and the more access you have to your leaders, the more we hear one voice and one movement that wants to rise up and wants to come into being more and have a richer, fuller experience. So as leaders in our group, we are all open to discussion, suggestions, emails. No one gets more emails than Reverend Sonia and Dr. Edward about everything, and every email they get, they respond to in one way or another to let people know that they've been heard, and they pass that on to the rest of us. Reverend Sonia? Any thoughts?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. When we think of being a change agent, I think we're in a very interesting time in the world. And I've heard it called a transformative time. And I think that, you know, we look around ourselves and we see so much changing, and some change we're a part of, and some change we seem to be at the effect of. There's a lot of change that happens, and then there seems to be, and Reverend Michelle will know this from her organizational work, there seems to be a bit of a plateau. We get to take a breath. We get to maybe try to learn from what just happened, and then we can maybe even get ahead of some changes. And this time of a global pandemic has vastly impacted our communities. And we're joined here tonight by our field leader, Dr. Sharon Hudson, who hears more about that than maybe any of the four of us here as the executive team, and Dr. Edward, our spiritual leader, is also with us. So we're seeing right now that change begets change. And so right from that first time in March when we realized that our world was going to change, and it's not really gone back, even for the people who think we're going to go back or want to go back, or they've said, I'm not good with change, or I don't like change. It's really not become an option to have that viewpoint right now. So it is a very interesting time for our communities, and they've gone through more change in the last 3-4 months than maybe they did in the last 3-4 years, or the last 15, 20, 30 years of their existence in their communities. So the vast majority of inquiries that come in right now are around, how do I do this? Or could you just tell me what to do? Really, we're sharing with each other the best practices for how to navigate change.
So I have a question we've got leadership here, you all. So anybody who wants to open their mic and respond to it, it's welcome. I want to get the conversation going, and then of course we'll allow others to ask questions as well. But what do you all foresee in terms of how the current events are affecting our organization? What do you see in terms of the promise of what we can become? We've had an opportunity to reset. We've had an opportunity to spend some time looking at things. So what do you see? And either of you can open up.
Yeah, I'm happy to start this off, and I think really Dr. Sharon hears and lives in this question nearly every day. You know, there's that saying that we have of the universe takes care of the how. And so we as an organization wanted to be more technologically clued in, hooked in, connected, and even centers that weren't that technologically advanced they had a desire. They had an intention, maybe one day when I've got the time, or when I have someone to do that, or, you know, when I hire a summer student or something. And so the universe certainly has taken care of the how, because now we are more plugged in and we've learned more in a shorter time than I think we ever thought we were able to. We've also been saying for many years that we wanted to be a global organization. And I hear every week about Sundays where in services, people have shown up from other places, other states, other countries, other parts of the world. So we have become that global organization. And I think it's very difficult to predict exactly where we're going to be, but we certainly are on the path of something, and we're going to see more of that. Dr. Sharon, do you want to come forward and maybe put a little more structure around what you're seeing in terms of communities and how they're becoming what it is that maybe they're going to land in being? Some of them are probably closer to that than others right now.
Sure. You know, there's two levels of change in the organization. One is that of the field, all of our different ministry centers, teaching chapters, focus ministries, etc. And that's what I'm closest to. But there's also a perhaps, you know, we also have changes at higher levels within the organization. So I'm just going to talk about the field for now and let you know that for the most part, our centers are doing better and very well. We have a few that are struggling, but I just tell you across the board, I'm seeing many reporting better finances. I'll say in some cases it's because they don't have to pay rent. Depends where they are and what their situation is. But in many cases, it's because their reach is more broad. They've been able to reach farther beyond the walls of their sanctuary or their meeting place. And so the news is good. The other news that's good is that there's a great deal of creativity going on in ways to engage our communities, help people feel really connected. A lot of times it just means staying on a Zoom call or having a separate Zoom call right after a Sunday service if you're still having Sunday services. In some cases, it's having a discussion group instead of a Sunday service. And then it's also an extraordinary outreach. Many of our centers are finding ways to really connect individually with people at home to be sure they're okay and to check in and to help them feel connected and known and heard and loved. And so I just see that we're touching a lot of lives through our communities and our ministries. And so it's all changed and it's all new, and we won't go back to exactly the way it was before. I'll just give you an example of one community that moved to a location that wasn't as convenient and lost some people. And that was probably about 1.5 years ago, maybe more. And then when they started to do their online services, those people that, you know, would drive up once in a while are now joining them, and they're going to be meeting 3 times a month, or well, they'll only meet in person once a month. They like the technology. They like, you know, doing church from home. So we'll see some shifts and changes in the future. I'm excited about all that. And it's organically happening. because there's a need. And that's the best way for change to happen. We see, I love what you said, Michelle, just that process of where does the request come from? How do we discover that there's a need or a shift ready to be done? So I'm excited about what's happening in this strange time, frankly.
Great. So tonight, you have your leadership here. What questions do you have from your vantage points, from being in the world where you are, in the way that you are? What questions do you have for your leadership regarding it? It could be change, or it could be, you may want to know more about them, because we have a platform for you to engage them, so you might as well seize the opportunity. So if you'd like to pose a question, just put it in the chat, and I can call on you. What do you all want to know? I have while you're typing, I'm assuming people are going to the keyboard and they're typing. I want to know how many, if you have any data on this, Sharon or Sonia or anybody, how many centers have reopened and are actually doing social distancing and live service? Do you have any sense of that?
Very, very few, and some have. And usually they're in locations where it's fairly safe, or they're meeting outdoors, and taking all kinds of precautions. In California, where I am, you have a whole checklist if your county is in a position where you can reopen, and that's pretty much not the case here. So I do know of a few, very, very few that are actually meeting in person. Usually they're very small groups, so they're still doing the live streaming or Facebook Live or something, and so people are tuning in through technology, and they're keeping the people in the sanctuary restricted. I'll give you one example. John Waterhouse's community has been meeting. They met once outdoors. They have a very, very large sanctuary. They can safely have 70 people. I can't remember how many they hold, maybe 250 or 300. And they can only, according to the precautions, have 70 people. And he says, the funniest thing, I said, did you take reservations? And he said, no, actually, it's funny. That's how many people show up on Sunday. And so but they're very careful about everything they're doing. So they're actually having live services in some of our smaller communities that don't have a large congregation, but have a large space to meet. I think the indoor thing, if you have good air handling, that's the most important thing. The outdoors is so much safer right now. Here in my community, the city is helping provide outdoor seating for restaurants so they can open outdoors. It's really amazing. Picnic tables and all kinds of things are going up everywhere. Mm-hmm. So we're coming back to life.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So we have a question in the chat. How do we get to the point when we develop a strategy and skills to be the change agent? Any of our guests want to respond to that? Of course, I always have something to say, but it's not about me. Can you all respond to that? How do we get to the point when we develop a strategy and skills to be the change agent? And what I'll do, I'll help you all out. I'll go ahead and share that slide that I had jumped over before because I was going to debrief the poll with that, and I wasn't able to access the poll. Oh, it's this way. Okay, so here are some of the characteristics of effective change agents. They're courageous. Why is courage important? Because oftentimes you are being disruptive, disrupting status quo when you are proposing a change. So you have to have the courage to assert your want or your need or your interest or your expectation. So it requires that. It requires a high commitment to effecting change, because commitment is an action word. It means that you care about this change and you're willing to take the action to bring it to fruition. So the commitment has got to be there. You can't say I'm going to try, because we know what happens with that. That's a lukewarm commitment and nothing happens. You have to be an advocate. You have to be an advocate for it. So what does that involve? That means, and this is a word that I use often in my work, that means socializing the change. That means enrolling other people in your vision for the change. That means that you have the ability to get people to mobilize behind you, to be in support of what it is you are wanting to bring forth. Because we were talking about being a change agent to facilitate more inclusion within the organization, within your individual centers, empathy is a skill that one needs to develop. The interesting thing is I'm working with an Army command right now on a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And so this particular leader is very, very hands-on. And I had to lay out everything that I was going to do. I had to outline everything that I was going to include in the training. And I used the word empathetic. You have to develop empathy for others. And so he writes me back, and this is a research laboratory. And so mostly engineers and scientists. And so he wrote me back, empathy? Do you mean cognitive empathy or emotional empathy? We don't want any of that emotional empathy, because then we won't be as objective. And so, you know, some folks are, and in his case, I would say he is concerned about maybe processes being compromised, standards being compromised, and that's not what we're talking about. I said to him, empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is having the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and trying to see a situation from their perspective. Now, that doesn't mean that you forego criteria. As we said, in that change management process, there's criteria. There's certain steps that have to be followed. And so you don't want to overemphasize empathy at the expense of compromising the integrity of that process. So that's what I had to share with him. So I'm sharing that with you. It's not sympathy, which means that you take on the, say, the feeling nature of others, which means that you can no longer be objective. And as many of us are practitioners and ministers, we know that we have to transcend, we have to rise above the condition, right?
I'm going to jump in here while we reconnect with Reverend Michelle, and on the subject of empathy, because I love this list. I think there's one thing that's not on here, and maybe there's a couple, and it's not a checklist, and it's not, you don't have to do it in this order, and you certainly don't have to do it perfectly. That's the thing. It's a hard task to be the first person to go forward with an idea. And as I'm looking at empathy, which I've never considered in this instance, it's also hard to be one of the first people to hear a new idea and to hold space for a new idea. One of the characteristics of a human intelligence is that we have the ability to look at something without accepting it. And if we can go in and develop that together to where we can look at something knowing that we are looking at the benefits and the values of it, like a purchase we're going to make, what will it give us if we do this, and what will we give up to get it, will allow us a little more easy in our process and no room for fear to sneak in. I don't see our Reverend Michelle. I lost my slide.
Risk-taking was next.
Risk-taking. I think the risks are highly exaggerated in these instances, because when we initiate change. Change hasn't happened yet, but we react to it like it has. And we don't know what it is, and it's coming whether we want it or not, because someone said it should be so. And we take our words seriously as religious scientists. And if somebody starts talking words that we don't want or are not in our belief system yet, it can be a very frightening time. But the risk first is just to simply look at it for what it is and to seek understanding. And out of that understanding, a lot of fear dissipates, and a lot of the risks are a lot less. There's a lot less to lose than we initially think. Just my thoughts off the top of the head.
I love the question about strategies and skills. And whenever I read that, I always pause, because the conversation that takes place in an environment like here is different to a conversation that might take place like in a human potential skills development organization. And I pause and think, this question is being asked in the context of being a practicing religious scientist. And so maybe you already started there, but what I would be sure is to build consciousness and heart first, which means a lot of self-inquiry, which means definitely tune into that empathy muscle, which means things like definitely get clear on my spiritual values and what I stand for, and make sure that I'm willing to take responsibility for the emotional wake of my actions. And then out of that, the strategy that builds is matched to the consciousness. So if we start with skills and strategies first, it can be problematic. And so I wanted to offer that. I always ask, how does this question want to be answered in the context of being a practicing religious scientist?
So thank you for carrying on. We've got thunderstorms here and I got kicked off. Just to bring me up to where you are, Edward, what were you responding to? What was the question?
Kurt was talking a little bit about those beautiful words on the chart, and somebody very kindly, Jacqueline Edwards did, and then we were talking about, talking about risk-taking next. So,
oh, great, yay.
Kurt was saying, what did you say, Kurt? It's overrated.
Thank you, thank you. So yeah, sometimes you have to take some personal risks. What does that mean? That means that you may be a little uncomfortable because you're moving from the familiar into the unknown. And so you've got to be okay with that, especially when you're in transition from what currently exists and what is becoming. There's a transition from the old to the new. And so, as I said, because the old you know so well, you may not even have to think about it. But the new, more than likely, is going to require more of you. It might even require that you learn something new. Like many of our ministers who had to master this technology back in March. You know, I got lots of calls because people know I do webinars, right? So I got lots of calls. How do I do a Sunday service via Zoom? And so they were on a learning curve. They were real uncomfortable. I remember one person said, you know, maybe it's just time for me to retire. And I said, well, that's an option. Or you could just learn how to master the technology, or better yet, you know, recruit, a next gen, recruit a millennial to help you with this. And so that's the risk-taking part. The other part is when you are introducing a change, it's natural that you meet with some resistance. And the resistance can be at the organizational level, it could be at individual and personal level, but that's just a part of the process. Why? Because for some people, it's disconcerting to change. And so just knowing that that's a part of the process, being prepared for that, and know that you run the risk of maybe making some people uncomfortable, and being okay with that. If, of course, you have done your due diligence and you really perceive that the change is going to be for the better. Of course, you won't know until it's implemented, but a lot of thought, a lot of working consciousness has occurred. It might have even been a vision. It could be even be a calling. And so if you're answering a call and it's just so compelling that you just must go forward with it, then you just have to trust. And a part of the process as well is just trusting the change process. You know, just having faith in it and having confidence in it. So that's what I want to say about that. Any other questions that you all have? And I'm going to see if I can get back to my slides again to make sure I captured all the words with regard to characteristics of change agents. So let me share. Oops, it took me all the way back. Let me get there. Okay, risk taker, then highly motivated to affect change. So if you're not really motivated, it's going to manifest in your commitment, in your attitude, in your behavior. And so not only do you want to be motivated, you also want to check in, you know, what is my motive here? You know, why am I wanting to bring forth change? And you need to also master being a person of influence. What is a person of influence? Usually an influencer is one who can persuade others. And the thing about being an influencer is that you can't, it's not something that you just label yourself, hey, I'm an influencer. By maybe being an ally to others, by maybe supporting someone else, by, say, circulating someone else's idea, you're actually influencing. And so it's about those heightened interpersonal skills whereby people listen, people will mobilize behind you, they will support the change. Now, that doesn't mean that they always agree with it, but they might say, well, you know, of all of the alternatives, I think this is the best alternative. I can get behind it. I can support it, even though it's not my first choice. So being a person of influence is, again, being able to move people along, advance people towards the new state, the desired state. And then also change agents are allies, and sometimes, because we're talking about inclusion, sometimes individuals may not have, or groups may not feel as though they have a voice. But if you have a voice, if you have a platform, if you have the position to affect change, then you may want to be an ally to the voiceless. So with that said, I'm just gonna stop sharing and allow you all to get in the conversation with thoughts, with reactions. D. Jacqueline has her hand up.
Yes, I do. And so I'm going to be brief as possible. I wanted to harken back though to two of these. And I think the first, the highly motivated to affect change. The comment I want to make about that is that I think we are often highly motivated to affect change simply by seeing what's going on in the world and the impact that is having on us individually and collectively. Mm-hmm. And it is critical in that to go back to what Reverend Edward was saying about doing our internal work, that in order for that motivation to drive drive work that is impactful and effective, it has to come from our spiritual core. That the thing that pisses you off the most is the thing that is your trigger to do your spiritual work and let spirit reveal that which is mine to do. The other piece that I wanted to ring in on is this being an influencer, and that one of the ways, particularly in our ministries and our practitioner practices, that we get to be influencers is by showing up for people, by doing the work that we are here to do, by being available, because that builds trust. I'm complete. I'm proud of myself. It was very brief.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Just your reactions, your comments. I'll even take an epiphany. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Hi. The word ally is an interesting word. I find more and more. It's not a label that I apply to myself. If somebody gives that label to me and honors me with that label, then I will receive that graciously. But the word I prefer to use in the work that I do is advocate, or somebody who comes alongside, rather than ally, because I think it's a dangerous slope to be able to call myself an ally for any group if I have not earned that and been honored with that title, because I may think I'm doing the work of allyship and I could actually be doing harm. So the word ally is one that I am very cautious of using or bestowing on folks at this point. So just wanted to bring that to the table.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Well, I'm working on trying to pull the poll up so that you all could do an assessment of where you are. Charlie, if you can hear me, can you make me the host? I want to see if I can access the poll again. If you, or can you? You're the host currently. Can you turn on the poll?
Oh, I've never done it.
Just click on poll.
It says launch poll.
But make sure it's the right one. Does it say change agent, effective change agent?
No, it says what's best reflects how you're dealing with COVID-19.
Oh, that's an old one. That's an old one. You have to. Can you make me the host?
I don't know.
Make me the. Okay, let me tell you how you do that. Click on participants. Find my name. There'll be two bars. On the right-hand bar where it says more, click on that, and it's you should be able to make me the host.
Okay.
While you're doing that, I'm gonna step away. I'll get my reference material and maybe I can talk us through it if we can't find it. You all just would intuitively assess where you are as opposed to going through the actual poll. Hang on one sec.
Well, Charlie's doing that and we're pausing. I just want to say that thank you, Jacqueline, for talking about the influencer. I'm going to be contemplating that even more because I think that's important, and it's about our relationships and, as you said, trust, and the fact that how we're seen by others as someone who is there really present and very aware. And I do think it's founded on our spiritual consciousness and our, how awakened I guess we are, but in our high intentions, and that's really seen by others. Therefore, we can be influential. I'm gonna just keep thinking about that one. That's a good one.
I appreciated that too. Sorry,
Oh, go
guys.
ahead, go ahead.
Oh, it made me think about not waiting to identify myself or yourself or us as an influencer at some future time when I've got the skills, to take to heart that I'm an influencer right now. And I may want to become aware of what I am influencing and own that, because I may want to change that. But to take notice that just the conversations I have, where I show up, the logos on the t-shirt that I wear, all of those are my influence in action. Thank you.
Ah, guess what? I can access the poll now.
Okay.
So there are 2 questions. I'm going to launch it, and you all can, there are multiple, it's multiple choice, so you can click all that apply. Here we go. You should be able to. Are you all able to see it? Okay, great. So far, only 9% of you have responded. I'm going to keep it open for 2 minutes, so that means we have another minute. %64% and rising. %70%. I like the 80. 74 and rising. All righty. We're at 2 minutes, so I'm going to end. And I'm going to share the results so you all see what you look like. Are you a change agent for diversity and inclusion? Check all that apply. 75% of you say that you proactively confront micro inequities when you witness them. 60% of you say that you consistently confront discrimination when you observe it. 65% say that you work to bring about change in order to prevent it on a systemic level. 83% of you said that you use your communication skills to successfully transmit to colleagues and leaders the need for changes. Second question, characteristics of effective change agents. Courageous, 83% of you. Highly motivated to affect change, 75% of you. Highly committed to affecting change, 73% of you. And risk takers, 63% of you. So I'm going to stop sharing and then just ask you all, you know, what is your takeaway with regard to what it is that you see? What might some of your expectations be based on these results? Were you surprised? Were you not surprised by the results? So let's just have some conversation around the results.
I'm trying to
open it. Okay, go ahead. Gloria.
Well, I don't know if it was surprise or not, but I realized as I was taking that, being a risk taker, I find myself being a risk taker, but that wasn't my intention when I started. And then I'm a bit overwhelmed at the position I've put myself in. And taking the poll just let me see how any one of those characteristics that you started off with, it's the consciousness, as 3 people have already said, taking a little bit more time to just know where I am on the position before I open my mouth, or when I realized how much I volunteered to do that it's not humanly possible to own it, has been only possible to get anything done is because of being really grounded in these principles year after year after year after year, and reminding that most of the time when someone is offended by something I've said, or I'm offended by something they've said, if I just remember the truth, it only takes minutes to move on to the next step. And I find myself still questioning a lot more, it's the right thing, but I have to keep moving forward anyway, no matter what. You can't stop once you put yourself out there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other observations about how we in the aggregate scored on that assessment? Any surprises? Oh, Bonnie, sorry. Thank you, Bonnie. I see you. You'll need to unmute.
Right. Sorry. I noticed that on the top part, there were, on the first part, there were a lot of questions about dealing with iniquities and discrimination, discriminatory practices. On the second part, it was more personal, or not personal, it was more about courage, and which is interesting because the first part dealt about courage, but it wasn't called courage. So people, as we know, as we're becoming more aware of, a lot of people, first of all, don't understand or recognize discrimination when they see it or come in contact with it, and then they have trouble dealing with it and doing something about it. They are hesitant to say something or know exactly what to do, or they're in a quandary because they don't see a problem maybe. Whereas with the second part, I think a lot of people don't have those same types of conflicts with other situations. So it's more clear cut.
Okay, thank you for your observation. Yeah, others of you? Because it definitely does take courage to speak up and to speak out when you observe micro-inequities, microaggressions, injustices. And so no, we don't, I didn't call all of those very specific behaviors courage, but it does take courage to exhibit those very specific behaviors. So that was a great observation, Bonnie. Thank you for that. And Jeffrey, I wanted to give you the definition that we work with regard to ally. It's a person of one social identity group who stands up in support of members of another social identity group and who is willing to act to help end microinequities, discriminations, injustices, and to amplify unheard voices and to protect the rights of all. So that's the definition that we work with regard to ally. So what are your what's your take on that, Jeffrey?
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for that clarity.
You're welcome.
I think having those definitions is definitely useful. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Okay, here we go. Let's see what's in the chat. Can someone give examples of specific types of changes that you're talking about in implementing beyond technological changes, either globally or in individual centers? So what we are talking about, or what I'm talking about, Jenny, is the change can be a social change. The change could be a procedural change. The change could be a policy change. But it's all in support of inclusion, right? So let's say, for instance, you are in your individual center and you really start to increase your awareness around certain practices. Okay, you really have to imagine this, right? Because since we're in virtual space, we're not in physical space, but just go back to a time when we were in physical space. And so you're saying to yourself, you know, I really want to be more inclusive. And in order to do that, I have to be much more mindful. And so I've got to be observant, and I've got to be more aware. And so you discern that maybe there are opportunities for you all to really make, say, first-time guests feel more welcome. So you have to change what you're currently doing. What are you currently doing? Maybe you're leaving it up to them to reach out and to approach different people. But you're saying, no, you know what? We should be more welcoming. So maybe we have folks who have the responsibility and the assignment to make sure that they connect with first-time guests, to engage first-time guests. And so you put that system in place. So we're talking about all kinds of changes with regard to creating and fostering environments where there is a stronger sense of belonging and where people feel included. That's what we are talking about. That is the purview of this conversation. It's about inclusion, and it happens in myriad ways. For instance, I was working with a center last year, and I went in and I was helping them. I have a program that I did at Vista. Well, I don't know if we called it Vista. Well, year before last when we did our virtual convention, I think it was Vista as well, but it was 2018. And so it was becoming an inclusive spiritual community. And so I put folks in small groups and I tasked them what needs to change to be more inclusive. And so it was determined that, you know what, we need to make sure that our sound system is up more, because we have an aging population, and you know, we really weren't sensitive to that in the past. One other spiritual leader said, you know, I use PowerPoint slides, but you know what, I like small font, I like calligraphy, but if you are visually impaired, it's not the best print. And so we're not being inclusive. We're excluding people because they can't see them. Or we're excluding people because they can't hear everything that's going on. So inclusion unfolds in myriad ways. And so if the eye is attuned to where are those places and spaces where we can, you know, just really expand that circle of inclusion so that people have a much more pleasurable experience, then that's where you may want to affect change. So we're talking about change in a number of different ways from a number of different perspectives. So hopefully that answered your question. Let's see, what else do we have? All right. So I had a question, can I send the commission's working definition of an ally? I don't know if the commission actually has codified one. This is a definition that I do in my work. My practice is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I can put that in the chat for you if that would be helpful. All right, any questions? My commissioners are here as well. Do you all have questions or comments that you'd like to enter into the conversation, commissioners?
Everyone, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. My computer has been a little funky tonight as well. It's good to be with you all. Yeah, you know what struck me in that poll, I really appreciated it. I love a poll. Is that the attributes in question 2 to me really felt like the building blocks of being able to act on consistently the behaviors in question 1, and sort of how can I take those attributes of courage and risk-taking and empathy, and I'm forgetting the others in this moment, but how can I take those values and attributes in myself to be more inclusive in my practice? Through the specific examples that you raised in the poll, Rev. Michelle, in question 1. So I appreciated that. It's good food for thought in how we interface with the world and how we create change in those really practical ways when it comes to inclusion.
Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. Any other commissioners you want to get in with a comment, or any attendee? Do you have any questions, comments, and or reactions? They're all welcome. Insights, epiphanies, they're all welcome. And because I'm trying to type the definition into the chat of ally for you all.
I think Jacqueline has a thought.
Yes, I do. So
this is Moore Horton and with Woodland Chapel in Salem, Oregon. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Great. The other day I tried entering one of these and I sounded like Donald Duck or something. It's really bad, really bad. Anyway, I was reflecting on introducing change into organizations. And I think the 2 words that came to mind that were used in this list were empathy and courage. I think I've found in my experience, limited as it is, that introducing change is often done best when really listening to what your community needs or wants. And sometimes you have to kind of look a little deeper than what they're saying, but oftentimes you can find out pretty readily.
Mm-hmm.
And then responding, but just because one person has a wild idea doesn't mean you should rush off and do it. That's for sure.
Right.
But if change is needed, for example, I mean, a simple thing, order of service changes. Sometimes our centers are pretty set in the way they produce things. And so introducing changes in our order of service was done rather gradually. And we just did a little change there and said, we're going to try this for a while, not for a while. Pretty soon, nobody's excited about it negatively at all. They like it. They find it comes about. So being careful to introduce change respectfully, I think, and with a certain amount of, not rushing it. It's too much. Of course, the opposite example of that is this last technological change. Within a week, we had to go from being in person to being online. That was quite shocking for me. Oh my gosh, I got the job. Anyway, we managed. Sometimes change does just get kind of forced on your community. But generally, gradually and with a great deal of respect for the folks and what they're used to will, in my experience, help change to be introduced and to not be thrown out right away.
Yeah,
That's
thank
all.
you for that. Thank you so much for that, Reverend Marb. Because one of the worst things that you could do is you can introduce a change and it's not really well thought out. You haven't taken into consideration all of the potentialities, the implications of it. And if you start too soon, it's a false start, because then you have to stop and you have to self-correct and you have to adjust. So you absolutely want to make sure that you introduce change gradually. I agree with that. Another thing, just a general comment about change, is you don't want to introduce too many changes simultaneously. Because what we don't think about is the fact that people have to psychologically adjust to change. And what that means is they have to wrap their heads around how the change is going to affect or impact them. At the end of the day, even though it's a change that you might make in your center, or it's a change that we might make within CSL at a very, very high level, I need to know how it's going to impact me. But if these changes are coming fast and furiously, what results is chaos, right? And as a consequence of being in that chaotic state, then resistance goes up, you know, or people become more defensive. So change management also requires that you implement change incrementally. You want to introduce a change. You want to take it through that process. You want to evaluate it. If you need to make adjustments, you need to make adjustments. When it becomes habitual, when people don't have to think about it, they don't have to learn new behavior, then you can introduce another change. So thank you for saying that, because you're absolutely right. You don't want false starts as a consequence of being premature. D. Jacqueline, you had your hand up again as well. No? Okay. Others of you, questions, comments, reactions? And if we don't have any, okay, here we go. Jenny, yeah.
So I just want to say a couple of very positive things. So I am quite a new student of CSL, very sincere student, and which has become a very important part of my life very quickly since COVID, actually. And so I just want to point out the things that I felt very included in. Firstly, I'll say this meeting. It can kind of feel sometimes that if you don't know what's happening, if you don't get the information that, you know, maybe the people at the top are just getting the information, and then, you know, if you're lucky, you'll get the information if you're new. But I just want to say thank you for allowing this meeting, for me to be included in this meeting, because it's something that's very important to me. And secondly, something that I've been doing, thanks to the technology that you all provide, is I've been going onto the map, the global map, and finding various centers around the country that someday I'd like to visit. And I'm taking classes with a variety of centers, and that is due to COVID. That's everything being on Zoom. And so I've taken a class with the Vancouver site. I listened to the Sunday service in Oakland, California. I live in Rhode Island. I'm very interested in learning the, you know, just becoming, this is a global community. So to me, I want to participate in the variety of communities. Which is very exciting to me, because I love to travel and I can't do that right now. And this is a way of kind of being able to do that. And so I just want to thank you for including me in those ways.
Absolutely. You are so welcome. So glad that you chose to spend your time with us here tonight. And another thing I wanted to say about change to you all is in ancient Mandarin Chinese, there's one symbol for threat and opportunity. And for many people, change represents a threat or an opportunity. And so you might want to think about when changes are introduced, what side do you fall on? Because even with, with the advent of COVID-19, there have been tremendous opportunities that we've already, heard about tonight. And to Jenny's point, one of the things that I do, you all, I pop around to different centers every Sunday. I love it. I can't physically travel to all those places, but I've been to a lot of centers since we have been in this situation. So opportunity, what's the opportunity? To visit other places and see how, how other people go about teaching these principles, living these principles, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Yeah. Anything else? Because I don't have to belabor this, you all. I can set you up for the questions that we want you to contemplate for discussion on Thursday night, where your actual facilitator for that event, hopefully he will be here. I'm going to pause for just a minute, see if anybody wants to get in. If not, I'm going to share those questions and then I'm going to bid you an adieu. Any questions, comments, and/or reactions? I don't see any activity in the chat. All right, so I'm going to share with you all the questions that we'd like for you to contemplate. Oops. I always forget to share. I'm greedy that way. I've got to hit that share button first. All right, here we go. So on Thursday night, Reverend Rafe will be leading dialogue discussions in breakout rooms. And so these are the two questions that he'd like for you to contemplate in moving forward. What changes do you feel that CSL, this is the organization, and you get to determine the perspective from which you are looking at this as an entire entity or your specific center, or maybe on each of those levels, needs to make in support of inclusion? What changes do you feel that CSL needs to make in support of inclusion? That's the first question. The second one is, what changes do you feel that you personally need to make to be an agent of change for inclusion? And so he asked that you go into meditation around those questions, and then when you show up on Thursday, be prepared to engage in dialogue with other attendees, and he will have report outs from different groups. Another thing that I want to share with you all is I want to say thank you for the way that you all got your notes to me from the last webinar, and we had those breakout groups, because I included your comments to the leadership in that report. We had an opportunity to revisit the global vision. And so when we put you in breakout groups, the question was, how do we bring the vision to fruition? And so you had many ideas, and I just want you to know that I did pass that information on. It was included in our report to senior leadership. You have a voice, you are being heard. And so one of the things that came out was to socialize the global vision more, so that it's not, just on a website, but that, people really know that as an organization, we are endeavoring to live that vision. So I'm going to stop sharing. And with that said, I'm going to ask you all, are there any final words, questions, comments, epiphanies, stories, insights that you want to share before we end tonight? Is there, I can't tell if your hand is up. If your hand is up, you gotta wave. All right, Gloria, yes?
I am always so fascinated by a poll like you did tonight. It had color and we were getting the feedback right away. And is there a tool or is there a book or something on how to create that, or just?
Well, actually, it's a built-in capability of Zoom. You can create polls. So if you
gone that far, thank you.
Yeah, so if you have an account, you just want to turn that feature on in your settings. And then once you open a meeting, on your control panel at the bottom, you'll see polls. You just click on your polls. And I have some old polls in there. But I created this one tonight, but there's an old one. There's one on what is your emotional state? So that was a poll that I used right at the beginning of COVID. I don't know if you all remember, but I gave you that. I wanted to get a sense of, how people were dealing with it. But anyway, it's a built-in feature of Zoom. So very easy to use. And it is, a great way to capture information, in an expeditious way.
It was good.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments, and/or reactions? I just want you to know Rebecca put in the chat polling for meetings. So Gloria, if you want to learn how to use that, there is a link that's there. She said it'll walk you through polls and how to do it.
Thank you, Rebecca.
All right then, if I don't have any questions, you brought us in, Victoria. Will you take us home as well?
I'm here. I was copying that poll.
Okay.
So let's just turn within.
Well, before you do, I'm sorry. We have another comment before we go. I invited a friend who does not attend a CSL center. I think this did not meet her need of being a change agent for diversity. Then come back to part 2 on Thursday night. We were just laying a foundation tonight, and to be perfectly honest, I'm a sub, and I created this in an hour. So if it didn't meet your friend's expectations, it is what it is. I say come back Thursday night when there is small group activity and there's more work around that. But tonight was really about talking about change, generally speaking, and then also talking about it with regard to inclusion. So I just wanted to respond to that. All right, now Victoria.
Oh, let's turn within. And I am so thankful for this meeting tonight. And I'm thankful for all of the support in creating this webinar. And I'm grateful for Reverend Michelle jumping in and using her creativity to put together something that would bring us all together, bring us all into the same room, and focus us on this important topic of change. And as I know, as everyone knows in this room, this large Zoom room, change is life, and we welcome it. And how we deal with change is really a hallmark of our spiritual health. Seeing both and the whole picture is an outpicturing of our spiritual health. And standing in that firm conviction that we are peace, we are that love that is of God, that inclusion is a choice we get to make. And we are making that choice by showing up here with one another. We are making that choice every time we stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder together. whatever we call it, whether we call it we're joined by the heart, whether we call it allyship, we know that those relationships are what make us live our philosophy of oneness. Oneness is what we are. Individuals are how we express. And I am so grateful for this opportunity to be together. And I bless everyone as they make their way, maybe just a few feet to their bedrooms. And I know that they will have the best sleep ever tonight. And so it is.